Hello there, everyone. If you are watching this video, then you are part of the TTOR Army, an army that is building itself up one subscriber at a time. As you can see from the title and thumbnail of today's video, today we're once again, for the first time in a few years, responding to the atheist evolutionist YouTuber Sir Sic. Well, why are we doing this? Well, Sir Sic decided to condemn a creationist recently for using circular reasoning, and the problem with Sir Sic doing that is that by doing so, he proves himself to be an utter hypocrite. But let's not take my word for it. Here on screen, we have Sir Sic responding to a creationist Twitter user, Apologetics. Apologetics said, "When you start your thinking of Christ as your foundation for knowledge, you have a shield against delusion from worldly arguments." And I believe this is Colossians 2, verses 2 through 3 that he has underlined, which is the passage that says that all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge is found in Christ. And he wrote a bunch of other verses on the side margin there that are probably related in some way to the passage he underlined. So yeah, I agree with the post that Apologetics made. Sir Sic responded to Apologetics by saying, "It's called circular reasoning. I'm right because my book says I'm right, and that book is right because I say so. You might be convinced by that, but many people aren't that stupid." Well, Sir Sic, I hate to be the bearer of bad news to you, but people are that stupid, generally speaking, and you are one of them because your evolutionary worldview uses circular reasoning to date fossils and to date the sediment layers that fossils are in. And because this is the case, I responded to Sir Sic by pointing out, considering that Sir Sic's evolutionary worldview employs circular reasoning to date fossils and sediment layers, he looks like a massive hypocrite for condemning a creationist for allegedly using circular reasoning. And this is not the first time that I've called out these atheist YouTubers for using circular reasoning. Back in 2020, I put out a video on my BitChute channel titled "Vice Rhino Attempts to Debunk Chris Ashcraft by Appealing to Circular Reasoning." And in this video, we see Vice Rhino responding to Chris Ashcraft, the young Earth creationist who runs the Northwest Creation Network. And basically, in an attempt to disprove Chris Ashcraft regarding the flood of Noah, I think was the topic, Vice Rhino admitted that evolutionists like himself use index fossils to date sediment layers. And this is circular reasoning. And I can prove this using Google. So here I just typed in index fossils on the Google search engine and hit enter. And it says this: scientists specifically use index fossils to correlate strata found in different geographic locations. Index fossils are the preserved remains of plants and animals, primarily animals, that have existed in a limited geologic period, making them highly effective in determining the relative age of a rock layer. In other words, according to the concept of index fossils, they use the fossils to date the sediment layers, the rock layers. Well, how do you date the fossils then? If you're using the fossils to determine how old the sediment/rock layer is, how do you determine how old the fossil itself is? Well, I decided to ask Google that. I typed in, "Does the strata you find a fossil in determine the age of a fossil?" And according to Google and the evolutionist website Understanding Evolution from Berkeley EDU, it says relative dating places fossils in a temporal sequence by noting their positions in layers of rock known as strata. As shown in the diagram, fossils found in lower strata were deposited earlier and thus must be older than fossils in higher strata. This principle is known as superposition. In other words, the fossils are dated by the sediment layers, the strata that they're found in. You see how this works? The fossils date the sediment layers, And the sediment layers date the fossils. Fossils date the sediment layers. Sediment layers date the fossils. It's circular reasoning. Evolutionists literally use circular reasoning to date fossils and the sediment layers that they find fossils in. But it actually gets crazier than that, because if you take a fossil specimen and you submit it to a radiometric dating lab, when you are submitting your application to get your fossil examined by them, they not only ask you what sediment layer you found the fossil in, but they also ask you to provide an estimated age for the specimen that you're submitting. And we don't have to take my word for it. Here on screen, we have the application form for Direct AMS, which is a radiocarbon dating service. And you start scrolling through the document, and what you find on page 3 is a chart where you're asked to provide the sample ID, material, the site and location of your specimen. And then there's a column that says feature, stratigraphy description, which, if you know what the word stratigraphy means, it basically just means which layer of sediment, what strata did you find your specimen in. And then it asks for depth in centimeters. And then in the last column, it asks for an expected age of the specimen. So if you grab a fossil specimen and you try to get direct AMS to radiocarbon date your fossil, they will ask you what layer of sediment you founded the fossil in and what the expected age of the fossil is. Now, why would a radiocarbon dating lab ask you to provide the expected age of the specimen if the whole point of radiocarbon dating is to determine how old the specimen is? Well, it's really quite simple. They use circular reasoning to date the fossils and the sediment layers, and they want to know what the sediment layer you found the specimen in was and what the expected age of that specimen is, so that way if they come up with a radically different age of the specimen than what is expected, they can basically toss that out, or they can retest it if they think they made some kind of error when they were testing the specimen. But the point is that contrary to what atheists and evolutionists would have you believe, radiocarbon dating is not actually an exact science, and that they actually use circular reasoning to determine the age of fossils and sediment layers before they ever radiocarbon date anything. But this is not the only radiocarbon dating lab that asks you to provide an expected age for your fossil specimens. I have here a form for the International Chemical Analysis Incorporated Company, which I think, if I'm reading my addresses right, that's in Maryland. And it gives you client information, the type of analysis you want. But then look, in the sample ID section, it asks for sample ID, material type, mass estimate, and an estimated age range of your specimen. Well, ain't that just magical? And then here we have a PDF for the Center for Applied Isotope Studies at the University of Georgia, which is a radiocarbon AMS dating lab. And if you scroll down in their form, it asks you for a whole bunch of information about your specimen: the date submitted, the date it was collected, the sample context, the site name, the environment, the location, the longitude and latitude, any comments you want to provide. And then it asks for sample ID, material type, and look at that, estimated age. So once again, we have another Radiocarbon Dating Labs application form asking you to provide an estimated age for your specimen. And I looked up several other application forms for different radiocarbon dating labs that Google gave me, and every single one that I looked at had a column where you were asked to provide an estimated age for your specimen. Now, if radiocarbon dating was an exact science that gave you a very accurate age estimate of your specimen, then there would be no point in asking people to provide an estimated age for the specimen before they've ever had the specimen radiocarbon dated. However, if everyone is using circular reasoning to date their specimens before they've ever radiocarbon dated them, then it stands to reason that the radiocarbon dating is basically just for show, and that they use the concept of index fossils and circular reasoning to date the fossils and to date the sediment layers. So Sir Sic can sit here all he wants and accuse creationists like myself and apologeti of using circular reasoning, but the fact of the matter is that his very own camp of atheist evolutionist YouTubers, as well as the atheists and evolutionists in general, they use circular reasoning to date the fossils and the sediment layers that they find fossils in. They literally use circular reasoning to do all of that, and you can prove it not just by a simple Google search like I did, but you can even look up various application forms for radiocarbon dating labs, and you can see that virtually all of them ask you to provide an estimated age of the specimen that you're sending them. A request that makes no sense if they're not using circular reasoning to date the fossils beforehand, but if they are using the concept of index fossils and therefore using circular reasoning to date fossils and sediment layers before they've ever tested the age of them using radiocarbon dating, then that request makes all the sense in the world. But the bottom line is, Sir Sic, if you're going to condemn creationists like me for using circular reasoning, at least allegedly or in theory, then you are a raging hypocrite because your camp uses circular reasoning to date fossils and sediment layers. Either circular reasoning is bad, Sir Sic, and you need to start condemning your own camp for using circular reasoning to date fossils and sediment layers, or if you're not going to do that, then you can't condemn creationists for allegedly using circular reasoning because your own camp uses circular reasoning to date fossils and sediment layers. Whichever one you want to go with, Sir Sic, is up to you, but I'm pretty sure you're a massive hypocrite no matter what.